Okay, so in the last video I mentioned I had a handle that I had made and the mug broke, and so I wanted to make another, but truth be told, I've made two mugs. Well, I've broken both of those mugs, my fault, but trying to drill out a glazed hole and breaking it and trying to, during the glazing process I broke one, and so this handle is just going to have to wait. But I actually thought it looked really cool. This is stainless steel, so it's got a good amount of weight to it. And yeah, this is a decorative maple piece. So I'll need to find an appropriate thing to use it on, but I wanted to show you that. But I want to get going on something else. I really like this idea, and I want to know, can I use it for a teapot? So here's what I'm thinking. I want to have a teapot basically shaped like a bowling ball, maybe some sort of like stubby little legs, but underneath I can bring a handle underneath and have a pair of connection points like this under the bottom. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna, I'd like it to be a single bar, not two, like, you know, these have two, but I'll put a little knob of some kind or a handle, wood right here, and you know, something like that. So I need to throw the body in a lid and some spouts, and we can get this assembled, put some legs on it, and then start messing around with bending the metal and making up some wood on the lathe. And I think I might go ahead and make a pair of, I don't know, corresponding cups that would go with it in the same glaze. But yeah, I want to know, am I going to be able to actually attach this firmly? Am I going to risk with such a large lever, you know, will it break? I'm not sure. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get out to the pottery wheel and see what we can do.
I live inside my own world of make-believe.
And I have made these where I just regret later making the openings too small, because you shrink, and just I don't like a really small opening, so that actually looks good to me. I'm going to set this aside, take a measurement now, of course, before it starts to shrink, and I'll get a rough lid thrown up as well. So I have an inside opening of 3.5 inches. So I do like a deep teapot lid, but that's a little excessive. So I'm going to pull up this rim a little bit higher, and then we'll make a judgment call and take the needle tool to the rim. But however high I pull it up, that'll limit my knob size. So I'd like a tiny bit more than this. Take the cutoff wire to it. Let's take a little more. Make a little finger mark so they know we were here. And one more check. Looks good. Tomorrow we'll cut it off and flip it over and trim our knob. I obviously didn't need this much clay, but sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit bigger ball. It's easier to work with, and then you just cut off what you don't need. And I go all the way down to the bat. There is no bottom in this. And we'll start pulling it up. And once I know I'm going to need to needle tool off a bit, I think it's worth taking the time and spending a little energy making sure anything you want to get rid of, get it up to the top at the same time. And you want to be a little rough necking this in to help isolate it, that's fine, but I see it coming and I try to get ready for it. Well, I think that's going to actually give me what I want. I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple more, so it's always better to have an extra if you get right down to it and you just don't like it. There you go. We'll set that aside. Okay, first step, let's trim this pot. In this case, I'm not really sure I need this. My natural instinct is just to go ahead and trim it, but can't hurt. And I'm careful to make sure that I don't deflect the mouth of the pot. Just stick it down. So I did keep this in a wet box last night, or in my case in a refrigerator that's unplugged. And it still does dry, even though the humidity is quite a bit higher. Still does dry. But in this case, I feel like I could do well to let this sit around for another hour or two in today's warmth and stiffen up. So I'll do as much trimming as I can. If I feel like it's just not gonna go well, I'll leave it alone. And it will benefit, it'll dry quicker if the more I remove, the quicker it'll dry, so. And I'm gonna remove this entire foot. I really want it to be kind of an orb shape. See how sticky it is? It's not like coming off into ribbons. It's not because my tool is dull. And I'm taking little bites. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm trying to engage at a small point and kind of eat down the area I want to get rid of in a roughing fashion. And then I try not to have the entire blade engage at one time. In this case, just because I'm worried it'll bite it and tear it off the wheel. It's not a race. Take your time. You can see just how soft it is. Alright, well I'm happy with the bulk removal. I'm going to let this sit and maybe for an hour, maybe even a little bit less. I'll come back and check it. But I'm going to let this chill out and then we'll do a final finish and take a metal rib and get that all real smooth. I want a little flat spot on the bottom where actually that will be where the handle attaches, and I'm going to have 3 short little legs that will attach. I'm going to get some clay out and make those now. Okay, so I have a ball of clay that was sitting in a bag for a couple of weeks maybe. Granted in the fridge, but it's definitely stiffer than what I'm working with, which is nice. That way the legs can catch up with the body. So you can see that the coil I made is by no means even, but all I need is an even part. I'm sure you do that too. So I want 3 legs, so it's probably going to be right in this region. There. Tap them down on the edges, make sure I get rid of any little bits. And I'll do that to all 3 legs. Okay, so I'm going to use this triangle to kind of roughly give me a layout idea. And I'll just come up under the corners with a skewer and make a mark. So, one at a time, I'm going to scratch up the legs and add a little bit of slip. And I don't want them to be too splayed, but I want them to look like they're somewhat perpendicular to the ball at that spot. And then we'll trim the foot a little bit on the bottom to make it set real nice. It looks pretty good. Now to get the handle attachment installed. Okay, so for the handle attachment, I'm going to use some more of this clay that I used for the legs. And the goal is to make 2, for lack of a better term, macaronis, tubes. I need a pair of tubes, maybe 1 inch long. And I'll take a handle from, actually, it's helpful to start with a needle tool. Because if you come through and you're off, you can do a little bit of adjustment. Whenever you have something going through a piece of clay and you just roll it on it, it will open up that hole. So similarly, that's plenty big. Okay, we'll let these stiffen up, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of trim the ends of them. I'll show you. They're a little bit rough right now, but trimming ceramic little tubes, it's really hard not to collapse them and whatnot. If you let them just get a little bit stiffer, you take a razor blade to them, we'll clean those up. Okay, so we have the 2 little tubes trimmed up, and I want to attach them slightly spaced out, pointing out between. These will end up being the rear 2 legs for the teapot, so stick those on. I'm going to leave these really simple, really sharp. I mean, when it's all dried up, you take a sponge and just lightly go over it. I don't want the lid to be excessively heavy, and I also don't want the lid to be too terribly round, because I'm fairly confident I can't get the same curve to kind of match the pot given I have a shoulder. So instead, if I can't get it perfectly, I'd rather have it contrast and have this have a little bit more of a flat feel to it with a raised knob. Well, I'm liking how that's looking. Now I want to get a round tool and get in there a little better. And I like to give it a little recess down off the lid. It's going to drop in. It'll give your fingertips just a little bit more purchase. It looks good. It's a little bit looser than I had hoped. It's not as bad though as it might seem, and sometimes the lid can get ahead of the body and the body will shrink to fit, so you have to just trust your earlier measurements. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay, let's get to putting one of these spouts on. So you can see this is the one I videotaped throwing, and I didn't use the tool at the end to thin it up, kind of like I did for this one. And I usually leave them thick because they dry less quickly, and that area is going to be where it attaches and like it's soft. But if you look closely, you can see these are starting to lighten on the rim, which means that if I'm going to trim that, which I will, I'll have to use a razor blade. But I like this one better right out of the gate. So let's see if we can come up with a good cut for it. Ooh, dry. Ooh, too dry. Okay, let me get a razor blade. Okay, before I resort to the razor blade, I have a really thin wire on a handle. I'm going to see if this will pass through before I use a blade. There you go. And then it'll be cut. So I want to make sure that this tip is well high so I can trim it and this top is still above the rim line. But I'm kind of liking that right there. Okay, I think I'm just about there. I want the spout directly in line with this leg because the handle will be directly opposite that. So I want it about like that. Gives me a good idea so I can get the holes drilled and then get this all put together. I'm using a 1/4 inch bit if you were curious. Anything smaller than a 1/4 inch bit, I have more problems with it filling with glaze during the fire. You know, you blow them out and everything, but I'm actually not against bigger holes. Works just fine. I'm not throwing leaf, loose leaf in here. If I did, it would be in a ball or something. So it's more just aesthetics. It's more about aesthetics. A little smaller hole, I think looks a little better. And I want to make sure I get one really low. Yeah, that looks good. If the water kind of pools here. You want this bottom hole to be as close to the bottom. I'm going to leave that. That's more than enough. It should pour great. I can push somewhat firmly, but I'm not really worried about it being absolutely perfect because we're going to come back and put a little coil on it to close that seam. Now I'm not sure if your first thought is, man, that's a fairly big coil, but obviously the size of the coil that you put in determines the radius, and so if you want a abrupt radius change, then put a skinny coil in, but I'd like it to blend. So I'm going to take my time and work this in. Alright, well, let me keep doing this and I'll come back to you. So, wanted to show you the bottom. So that's how it's blended in. There's definitely some evidence of the edges of the coil, but I think glaze will go so far. I'm happy with a certain amount of honesty and construction, and if I really hate it, I can sand it after bisque firing. So, last thing I need to do is trim the spout. Let's do that right now. So you may have heard people say when you cut the angle into this that you should account for the twist. You should account for, I believe they say a counterclockwise twisting during cooking due to the tensions in the clay as you threw it on the wheel. And I have never cut an angle and had it correct itself. So if you are going to unless you know what you're doing and you do it all the time, I would suggest that you cut the end of this relatively flat. And if anything, maybe count on it turning counterclockwise just a little bit. But so this is far from ideal. You can see I'm really taking my time. I don't want it to chip. Rehydration, I think, is a bad move. So, and I didn't want it to be a blunt end. And I don't want it to be really laid back either. I just want to cut this back enough and give a really sharp edge so you get a good pour. And even this can be fixed after you bisque fire it. You can definitely sand this mouth flat if it just doesn't look right. Okay, so I have it fairly well cleaned up. And the last thing I want to do is adjust the legs to make sure that the top of the pot is level. And I didn't do this right away because, you know, you're working on it, you're pushing on it. These legs are kind of standing on their corners a little bit. I like that look, but I want to wait until I'm really done stressing it out before I decide what looks level. And then it's just a matter of waiting. Of course, you can't forget to put your maker mark and your year on it. Don't want to forget when you made it. Well, it's time to get to glazing. You can see this yellow is kind of an indication of the moisture that came through when I glazed the inside. And I have these two mugs that I want to, two cups rather, that I want to do along with it. And so I have white on the insides of all three. And next I want to put a white belly on this. And one thing I wanted you to notice as well, this is unusual for me. Normally I like to fire it with the lid on, which means that this area has to be raw. But I really didn't want to do that. In this case I have white on the inside and I have white to the edge here, and I'm going to fire it face down. And the risk, of course, is that something, either the glaze doesn't match or I don't know what, but this hole is a tiny bit loose, so getting a little glaze on the inside of this is also not a bad thing. But I really wanted whatever color we finally put on the top to go all the way over. I don't want that raw clay look, so we're going to fire them separately. I wanted to try something else new. I've never done this before. Because I'm going to I've decided I'm going to do an oil spot on this, which means I need to do several dips of Teapot before I put a cover on it. And I want to know, can I use a piece of sponge? I really don't want this to get 3 or 4 coats, right? I want to be able to plug it up and pull it out. Stick it in like that. I can grab it with some needle nose pliers, but let's see how that works when you dunk it. So I have 2 coats on the pot, and I want to make sure I get the same number of coats best I can on this lid. A little bit up on the edge there, but we're going to get several coats. I just don't want to go any further than that. Let that dry up.
Can't forget about keeping the cups up to the same number of dips because I want to match.
Okay, I'm about to find out whether or not this sponge in the spout was a good idea. You can see I just put the final dip on and it's still a little damp. Now let's find out what we did. Well, I still think that's better than multiple coats, but I wanted to pull it out now because the final dip will heal some of these wounds. This cover glaze falls out real quick, and it will not be the same from piece to piece if I'm not careful to mix it before each dip. Here they are one more time before they go in the kiln tonight. I'm really hopeful that the oil spot will be even across all pieces. Hopefully the lid and the body will match, but we won't know until the morning. Well, the teapot's out, and it turned out really nice. I did make sure to set the lid up on its own furniture in the kiln next to the teapot at the same height, in hopes that that's going to help make sure that the oil spot is fired exactly in the same way. And you can see the glaze on the inside turned out nice. Glaze going over the edge, also nice. You know, when you have to leave it raw, it's fine, but it just, I don't know, it doesn't look as good, doesn't look as finished. All the holes are open on the inside. This is the size rod that I'm going to be using, and just barely does not fit. And I'm not willing to drill these out. So instead I'm going to take this little piece over to the lathe, and I'm going to leave a fat section in the middle and thin it a little bit here, thin it a little bit here, and we're going to bend this up into kind of a U shape that will go in, and I can weld a handle onto that. So that's the plan. And the two cups turned out really nice too. I wanted to improve on the kind of the previous look of like a pair of macaroni noodles stuck on here, so this is a little bit more integrated, and I feel like with the glaze it definitely is going to be stronger. So 2 of those. So after much screwing around, I have a piece that fits, that pokes through enough for me to get a weld on there. So before I go and design a bender that I can use to bend this handle, I wanted to see if there was an easier option. So we're going to go old school first and see if we can do it without extra machinery. I was really hoping for it to be a little tighter though. I'm going to see if I can find a better tree. I think we got something. It's going to look good. Okay, so it's going to go something like that. Let me get this welded on. See what we have. You can see I added a little flat spot here, about 1.5 inch long flat spot, and that's going to be a wooden knob that'll kind of end this and give you a place to grip. Well, that is deeper than I expected. I really only want a knob about this big. I knew I had a crack, but it's obviously not going to be anywhere near this wide. So I'm going to work this area down here and find out if that crack maybe goes away and I have a chance of getting my little knob out of this. Well, this piece might be toast. That's too bad. It's pretty wood. Well, looks like we're going to get it. Well, here's what we're left with. I was looking for a piece about 1.5 inches long, and if I cut it right about there, that should be about 1.5 inches. And I want to make a pair of handles that are similar in design to the teapot handle for the two matching cups that we're going to make to go with the teapot. So you can see I pick one piece of wood. Try to find a piece of wood that has a very similar grain to the one that I was already using, and I try to make it out of the same piece of wood for both handles, and I make them at the same time so I can chase these two. This is going to be cut in half, and this is the bottom of the handle, and the metal will come out here. Just about done with these. Need to sand them out, cut them out, and drill them, and we'll get back to those two teacups. Well, here's where we are. I've gotten it's not welded on yet, but it's slipped in place. And you know, I'd originally set out to make a handle a little bit bigger, but as I went through the wood, I ended up on this shape, and I'm liking it. And I've also gone ahead and used the metal lathe to make some handles for these two cups that are going to go with it. And I need to get these all glued up and welded on as well. But one thing, I really don't want the handle, neither of the handles touch the table, but they're really close. So I'm going to take these off real quick and take them to the belt sander, shorten them up, resand them, make them a little bit shorter. Okay, that looks really good. Well, I think those look really good. We'll let them dry, and tomorrow morning we're going to weld them on and wrap this project up. Well, the glue is dry. All we have to do is weld it now. Let's get this done. This is the flagship. This is the coup de grace. This is what I started to make, and man, I do not want brakes. So I got to figure out a way to hold this. That is what we're going to do right there. I have good metal contact. Now, after 2 weeks and I don't know, at least a dozen hours of work into this project, it comes down to this last 30 seconds, and is it going to break or is it going to work? Here we go. Boo! Chipping. Well, when it comes to that little chip, I think we got lucky. I thought I was going to have to glue on the piece perhaps, but that white on white, you just can't really tell. I don't think it's worth putting that little flake back on. Well, when it was all said and done, I think this turned out pretty good. I think it looks cool. Definitely unique. Now, next step, of course, is to use this for a while and see how it holds up. Am I gonna have any problems or not? But for a first attempt, I think that looks really, really good. Well, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks again.
I live inside my own world of make-believe.